I don't know if she was putting it on for a wide-eyed grandchild, but like I grew up convinced that one of the strongest, smartest women I knew absolutely believed in these fairies, and these were not kids' fairy tales.
Right.
These were old country fairy tales.
Welcome to Tabletop Talk, a unique podcast where I delve into the minds of creatives in the tabletop gaming space. I'm here to uncover their creative processes, inspirations, and I'm driven by my passion for understanding who they are and why they create. Enjoy this interview with Navi and Shawn Drake, the creators of Court of Blades and Hedge. We talk about how Hedge could have been a D20 game and why that was abandoned. Their unique insight into crowdfunding and being a creator full-time. And the big question, can you win an RPG? Okay, please sit back, relax, protect your hearth, and enjoy my time with a couple of Drakes.
This is Lee.
And this is Pat.
And we're Diesel Shot. And when we're not making games, you will find us listening to Tabletop Talk and fucking up the tape.
Howdy friends, Craig here. My guests today are Navi and Shawn Drake. They are a 30-something married couple who enjoy writing, gaming, and writing games. They are also great friends to me and the show. You may know Shawn as the GM of our actual play of Court of Blades. Navi may be familiar for her incredible run on our play of Brindlewood Bay. Basically, their design sensibility is sharp and minimalistic. They see the heart of a game and write just enough around it. It's so weird for me to do this intro with you guys because, like, I don't know, like you're not guests. Like, we just hang out. Welcome to the third floor.
Thank you.
It's good to be back.
So, I know you've like won all kinds of awards and acclaim and everything. You are the only people who've been on the show 3 times
It's a
now.
three-peat.
They're like, yeah, we've got like a sticker or a button or something we've got to do.
You can't get rid of us.
Yeah, you gave us some oxygen. And you know how it is when you feed strays.
So, and you know, when I start each interview, I like to ask a question, and I'm running out of questions for you, but I think I have a new one. So I want to start with you, Navi. Is there an RPG out there right now that you have not had a chance to run or play, but it keeps knocking at your door?
Yes. So this is because there's a little bit of contention between Shawn and I on this. There's a game called
here we go.
This game called Annalise that is a very introspective gothic kind of think piece of a game, and purely because of the trueness to the genre that it has, I'm very curious about it. I want to play it. I love the gothic genre. I think it's super interesting. I think a lot of people try to tap into it. They don't hit it quite right. They do it very pulpy. They do it, yeah.
Yep.
And this is not that. This is very like Castle of Otranto, like Misery. And I'm like, that's really neat. And Shawn's all like, why would I want to play Misery?
So how does it compare to like a Bluebeard's Bride? Is it a similar type thing where like I look at that game and I'm like, I hear that game's amazing, but I don't want to put myself through it?
No, I think it is that. It's exactly that. It's the like the premise of the game is that you are being oppressed by something. It's not necessarily even something that has to be real. It could be a real figure, but it doesn't have to be. But there is an oppression that is present that you have to kind of like base all of your actions and thoughts around. And to me, that's very heart of Gothic, and I think that's really interesting. And Shawn's like, yeah, but why would you play that?
the way that it's framed in the text, I remember like it is you have to be on board with playing an abuse victim.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. Yep.
Well, I mean, isn't that the epitome of Gothic?
It really kind of is.
It is. It's a big part of the genre, right? Is that oppression?
But I would have to play that guy.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I didn't think about that. Maybe I should play the asshole.
I always GM, and so like you're asking me, hey, could you just like abuse me for like 3 hours? No. No, please.
That's really funny. It's a great point though. Like it, you know, when I'm running games, and Navi, you went through my session 0. Like I have very clear lines and veils, and some of those lines and veils are about I don't want to play this world because I'm the GM and I will be that world, and I don't want that. So I totally get that. How about for you, Shawn? What's knocking at your door wanting to come in?
When she said that we had a point of contention between the two of us and we were going to be at odds, I thought for sure she was going to pull out one of these OSR games. Because like a dungeon game full of exploration and like a deep world that, she's not going to be responsible for building alongside me, just like can get lost in the fiction. I thought for sure she was going to trot out one of those.
Because we scratched that itch recently, we made a cute little game called Dungeon Jam. It's finally made a dungeon game that he'll play and that I really enjoy. So like, I don't have to have that complaint anymore.
So
continue.
What's funny is I was going to be like, actually what's really weird is I've recently been on a huge, I hesitate to use the word OSR because the game I'm going to plug is tangential to the OSR. It's what I would consider like new OSR or NSR or whatever. The first one is Neoclassical Geek Revival. Are you familiar with that one? Oh man. So it is a game built on OSR principles, but it has so much new narrativist juice to it. All of your stats are hit point trackers. So your dexterity can be your stealth hit points. And then anything that is affecting your stealth can detract from your stealth until you're found. Its character generation is classless, or rather there are classes, but it's piecemeal. You get so many pie wedges, and you can take bits, and depending on how many pie slices you take from each of these classes, you get different skills and abilities based on that. It's got position and effect.
Really?
Yeah,
nice.
It's handled really interestingly though, because when you start off, you're rolling. I can't remember if it's 2d10s or 3d6s, but it's a much more.
Higher variance.
You can't critically fail and you can't critically succeed, but it has a higher it's got a bell curve. It's a nice predictable curve, and then as things get hairier in the dungeon, that curve goes away, and now you can start critically failing and critically succeeding, and you start
that's
taking
interesting.
Worse consequences, and you can't go back. And it's always player facing. Okay, well now it's risky. So once you go risky, you can't go back to controlled, and once you're in desperate, you can't go back to risky. So you have to. Oh, that's it. Yeah. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff in that. But the other one that I really want to get to the table, one that I was actually reading this morning, is Valiant Horizon by Binary Star. Have you seen that one?
No.
Craig, man, I got to send you a reading list.
I'm so disappointed.
So Valiant Horizon is exactly what I wanted Fabula Ultima to be, but did not hit for me. It's Crystal Punk. It is vaguely JRPG inspired, and it's you communing with every character has a crystal that contains the soul of a hero that had more to give when they died, and so you are slowly uncovering the history of your crystal hero and taking on traits of theirs. It's got a lot of Lumen DNA in there, but it's a completely different system in that it's 3d6. You take either the way that skills and abilities go. Sometimes you'll take the lowest die. Sometimes you'll take the highest die. When you get advantage, you roll extra d6s and you take your highest 3. There's a lot of sometimes when you're supremely disadvantaged, you'll take the inverse of whatever you roll. So if you rolled a 6, you actually get a 1. There's some interesting dice juggling stuff that's in there. Really using the whole Buffalo as far as we're going to do a d6 dice pool game, and here's just a bunch of awesome stuff that you could do with d6s, and it made me fall even further in love with the d6. So both of those are hey, get me to the table, and I'm spoon.
So for the two of you, and the answer could be different for each of you, what tends to be the magnet, right? Is it like what you were talking about, Navi, where you have a very specific genre and a feel, or is it more like what you're talking about, Shawn, where it's just mechanics, or it has to be both? I'm trying to get a sense for each of you, what tends to be the gravity well?
No, I am the feels person, right? So I'm writing on vibes. I'm looking for something that like is going to promise me a story that I'm already interested in. That's why I love indie games so much. Because we see with bigger games, it's more of a toolbox, and the GM will tell you what you're actually playing. But when you pick up an indie game, you're kind of like already getting like you know what to expect more or less. The story will be different, but you know what you're getting into. That's why I love indie games so much. So I want the genre. That's what I want. I want you to like tell me that this is what we're gonna do, and then through mechanics deliver on it. My problem is that sometimes I'm disappointed, I think more often than him for that reason, is I'll pick it on vibes and then find out that I don't like the mechanics in play and go, oh, shit, I should have read the whole thing first time.
Yeah, that happens to me too. Yeah.
See, I pick up games and I read them cover to cover so that I can ingest the mechanics. Just like reading games is research, but I play games for vibes too.
Oh, that's cool.
So
yeah.
like I will, if you tell me you've got a unique mechanic or an interesting system or like a little subsystem or something like that, I'll pick up your game and I will read it, and I will enjoy the fact that I have read it. If the fiction is good, I'll be happy about the fiction, even if there's no interesting mechanics. But I will get a game to the table if they hit that sweet spot between here is a cool mechanical thing, and also here is this interesting world that we have put, and here is our objective, and that is cool too. Like Wild Sea.
That's one I've only read.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I've only read it.
I'm running a game for our patrons over on the Patreon right now, and it is appropriately named. It is wild, man. The way that the fiction spools out. I've been posting little snippets into your running your game forum, and it's fun. Really good stuff.
So guys, the Insider Insight series allows me to sit down with designers, developers, artists, writers, and creators and learn how they approach their work. I try to understand their process, inspiration, and the methods for crafting their creations. We're going to tap into the minds of Shawn and Navi and try to understand where Hedge came from. We'll be right back. This is the part of many podcasts where someone comes on, interrupts the show, and explains that you should consider paying for the content that you're listening to right now for free. That pitchman explains by giving $1 or more a month, you not only support the show, but you allow the show to grow and improve. Here on the third floor, we refuse to interrupt your episode of Tabletop Talk with such time-wasting pleas. We pledge never to run a spot asking you to go to patreon.com and give $1 or more a month, because supporting content creators keeps the content coming, even if there is a link in the show's description. And there is. We don't ask you to click it and become a patron. We don't waste time rambling about the benefits like early access to episodes, getting episodes without ad breaks like this, or even getting a chance to play in one of Craig's RPG sessions. Anyway, enjoy this episode knowing Tabletop Talk, despite being supported by its patrons, won't engage in such blatant appeals for support. So, has it been 2 years, I think, since I first saw this game? Yeah, and I think the first time is I had kind of put a blast out saying, hey, I'm going to be teaching a seminar at the convention coming up, and I would love a game to use as an example. And of course, you guys love bomb me and mail me a whole bunch of copies of Hedge and do the whole thing. And it was a great game to run it on. But now here we are crowdfunding it. So while we're recording this, we're in crowdfunding, and hopefully if I can get my stuff together, you're actually listening while the crowdfunding is still happening.
Otherwise,
nice.
Pledges,
But just real quick, before we dive into it, let me describe Hedge for everybody using the copy from the site, and then let's dig in. Hedge is a power fantasy indie tabletop role-playing game of nature's post-apocalyptic magical warriors versus hordes of scary fairies. Hedge takes place in a post-fall world where the last remnants of mankind have fallen prey to an onslaught of attacks from the other side of the hedge. The Fae were here before we were. they still remember. So, you know how I like to do with things, right? There was the day before. So nothing close to this was in your head. And then what was the first kernel? Where do we start?
Okay. So flashing back about 5 years, we were watching was it Red Scar Games? I think it was Red Scar Games. I'm gonna have to check.
It is.
They had done the Hellboy 2D20, and we were chatting with one of the guys who was working on that, watching them crowdfund, and I think I was soil blocking. We were growing microgreens for the farmers market at that point. And Navi's like, so if you had to use that system, what would you build? And I didn't really know. At this point, I'd already kind of fallen out of love with D20 games, but I was still not going to say I don't know. I don't think I'd use it. So I pitched something like, well, what if? Let's see. I've been playing a lot of like Warframe. What if we did like some kind of magical knights versus, I don't know, fairies, right? Like the old school, like Hansel and Gretel. What was it? Hansel and Gretel witch hunters. Van Helsing, old Black Forest kobolds and gnomes and stuff. And she's like, that's kind of cool. It's kind of. I didn't expect you to like pitch me a magical girl game though.
How is that a magical girl?
Navi.
Explain that to me.
So the core concept there has a lot of overlap because you are essentially taking on the role of a not quite superhero in the Western superhero sense, where you put on a costume.
Right.
Rather, it's just a part of your identity, and then you acquire magical powers that no other human has in order to fight darkness, right? So it's very much a masculine-skinned magical girl game.
It's a magical boy game.
Super interesting, because you are 100% right. Not that you needed my validation, but I never would have seen that. But it's now you say it out loud and it's very obvious. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So even in-house, like every now and then she refers to this like Hedge as my magical girl game. It's like we did Disaster Piece. Yeah. This one is like, oh, well, clearly like having the weird biomechanical magical suit of armor that only pops up when it's time to go fight fairies, and otherwise like you're just a scavenger running through the wilderness or whatever. But the moment that it comes time to defend humanity, then witchblade up and go across the hedge to go and fight the fairies where they live. Anyway, sorry, got distracted there. So I pitched this, and she's like, "You should write that. We should work on that." And I'm like, I don't know. I sit down, I start punching out, and like, I think we had 6 wardens when we first started, or four wardens when we first started. So like the Ashen Bastion, the Voice of Tempest, the Starless Knight, and the Briarbound Torch. Those were the first. And I write them out, and I've got interesting little snatches of in-world fiction stories that are whispered around the firelight about it's not all lost. These heroes are out there, and I write it down and everything, and then I'm like, okay, so on a D20 system, I need to have 10 to 20 levels that they go through. So what do they get at level 1? And I'm sitting down, and I'm like, what does the Ashen Bastion have at level 1? Well, clearly a good strength save.
Right, exactly. Right. How exciting.
You can already see where the first problem is, because as designers, we always try to make you feel like you are what you wanted to be out of the gates. You'll get more powerful in time, you'll get more abilities and more tools in your bag, but coming out of the gates, we want you to feel like the thing on the tin. And D20 games tend to not lend themselves to that, because you need to spread the progression out so far, and you have to be careful about power curves, and it's a lot of math and nonsense.
You're chasing the promise. That's why. That's why when you're level 20, that's when you get to have the rage that goes beyond death, and where you can turn into the animals whenever you want, and you can become an elemental or whatever. Level 20. That's
but
when
the game's
cool.
over.
The game's over, but you were cool there for that last level.
Yep.
So the first level, Ashen Bastion. Okay, strength score. They've got a +2 base attack bonus or whatever. But really, it was when I got to, because I'm like, well, everybody has to be a caster of some kind, right? Because the thing about martials and D20 games is that they largely feel eclipsed later on by anybody who can do spells. Okay, well, either it's maneuvers for martials, or we're going to call them spells or abilities or whatever. So I start writing out a D20 spell list for all of these wardens that all have to feel different, which means I need to write out 4 separate spell lists from 1st to 9th level. And I get through 3-4 spells, and I'm like, this isn't going to work. And I shelve it, and I put it in my desk, and I walk away from it, and I go grow microgreens, and decide I'm not smart enough for this yet. And then Spencer Campbell drops the Lumen engine.
Yeah.
This is years later.
About a year later, right? Year and a half.
Quick question before we jump on Lumen. Was this the beginning of what I believe to be your Fae fetish as designers? Because you guys have really leaned in on this dark fairy thing, and it's starting to show up a good bit.
Right,
was this the beginnings of it, or had that always existed?
Do you? They can't see, but do you see this lovely red beard, this Irishman sitting next to me?
So, Gran, when I was waking up, when I was growing up, my Gran, she told me stories about the Fae folk. She told me stories about the good neighbors, and she always did them with fear in her eyes. She was very, very superstitious. Like incredibly superstitious, to the point where like I internalized a lot of it. I spent every summer of my life with this little Irish woman, and leaving out milk and honey, leaving out a shot of sour mash for the kid for the good neighbors.
Oh, interesting.
And would never set a knife blade up because it cut the feet of the fairies. Always had to carve the cross into the top of the bread to let the fairies out. It was. I don't know if she was putting it on for a wide-eyed grandchild, but like I grew up convinced that one of the strongest, smartest women I knew absolutely believed in these fairies, and these were not kids' fairy tales,
right?
These were old country fairy tales. So that's always kind of been there, and I think that the moment I got to start sharing like some of the stories, remembering some of the earlier stories that I grew up on, and seeing the reaction that people had to them, like, man, I've never, like, Changeling the Lost and Changeling the Dreaming, like that. Those were aliens for sure, and they had their moments of terror, but as almost as like a monolith, right? Like all fairies is something that you could say in a lot of those games and a lot of those mythosi, whatever. Mythos, Greek. So, but I think that we use fairy very much as a stand-in, a mythic stand-in for anything that is alien to us, which means that it is the dark mirror of humanity, and that affords a broad latitude for what you can call. It's sort of like instead of calling them demons, we can call them fairies, and we avoid all of the unfortunately Christian implications of having our game be all about demons.
Well, surprisingly for me, as I absorb your games, it it's not as limiting, right? When we say that's what you're up against, and the spectrum is so wide, and it's part of what I find really fun about playing Hedge. Navi, for you, I understand Shawn's origins of it. What's your draw to this idea of this dark fae?
I'm in love with dark fantasy. I mean, first we went to Gothic, now we're going to dark fantasy. So I think everybody who's very surprised. I grew up on horror, Yeah, exactly. This is my therapy. What are you talking about? It stuck on me. So I gravitate towards anything that is inherently scary at its core, and I've always loved the flipping things on their head, like subverting expectation. So we do have a very Western view of fairies that have wings and are pretty, and we throw our children's birthday parties with fairy themes and whatnot. So taking them and making them like the rightfully horrifying things that they are is delightful. I love that. I will never say no to something that's off-putting. It's actually much harder. It's much harder to get me to do something that's like fluffy and light, which is why when we put out like a really cute little ash can of a game where you actually just play like little good fairies, like doing good works, and there's no violence in it at all. And that was like that's the furthest out of my comfort zone I've ever gone. I was like, here, I'm going to do something that's not horrifying.
Don't ask me to do it again.
That's it. That's
Look,
it's done. It's done. I did it once.
We showed range.
All right. So Lumen pops out of nowhere. And does this revive this microgreens epiphany?
A little bit. I think it was because Spencer dropped the Lumen SRD right after he launched Light. He dropped the SRD. It was 4 pages. It was very stripped back. It was very wieldy and everything. I'm reading it. Navi's on the couch. I'm reading it at probably 9 o'clock at night. So the kids are shuffled off to bed. She's sitting on the couch. I'm reading Lumen. I'm reading it, and I'm like, this is actually really. This would probably be really easy to make something on. And there's this jam running, so we should probably just build something real quick and be like, hey, we're part of the community. See us, like, wave our hands above our head. And I cannot recall what it was that prompted us to pull Hedge out of the desk drawer, but I remember it was definitely for that. You remember?
Oh, you're asking me to remember.
Okay, fair enough.
Oh no.
Well, here's the question then for you: Was Hedge where you landed, but not where you started, as you started thinking about how you're going to leverage the SRD?
So the cool thing about the SRD was that a lot of it was, well, all of it was written conversationally, right? Like Spencer was it was like having Spencer there holding your hand, walking you through the various mechanics and explaining why you would use these things. I remember looking at it and thinking to myself that we could get like a 10-page playtest document done in probably a day, because it was, you need 3 stats, you need a couple of class powers, and then you need a couple of enemies, and then it's good to go. So I think reaching for Hedge when we started, like, it was like, this was going to be a really, really simple, really easy, quick kill kind of project. And then I think it was 72 hours before it was a 60-page document.
Wow.
And it kind of spiraled from there.
So what was the beginnings of that explosion then? When did you realize it was not going to be a 10-page document?
I think the moment that we started, I showed Navi the notes for our four mythical characters. She's like, 4's not enough. And so she took the format and then wrote the Ember Heart and Wind of Razors, and since then she's written fully half of the expanded classes. Thousandfold Roar, that was all.
That came later.
That was later though.
We're being a little casual about this though, Shawn, because I like, so Navi, where, like, we can't just say you just wrote those. Like, where did those come from? Because the classes are so interesting. And some of them I literally read and I'm like, I have no idea where they could have found this.
That's interesting. So part of it does come from my love of, we're going to talk about magical girls. And every time I come on, I talk about, God damn it. Okay, here we go, Craig. So I love magical girls, and like there's always tropes. And so when I was looking at these, I was taking the same exact tropes. We need something that represents the different elements, different aspects of nature. These are, I mean, you don't even have to do magical girls. You could do Captain Planet, right?
Right.
These are things that need representation. So it was actually pretty simple from there to go, well, these are the things that are missing. These are the elements that I think are missing that would fit this setting. And then you just expand on it from there. And often what I'll do is I'll come up with an idea of something that I like, and I'll make a thumbnail sketch of it verbally. Because I'm a technical writer these days. I've really honed that skill. So I get lazy about creative writing, which is where actually my roots are. So now I'm lazy about it. So I'll make a very technical sketch of like, this is how I want to function. This is what I want to do. This is the role I want to fill. And then I'll hand it to Shawn. I'm like, make this sound really pretty. And then I'll write all the abilities for it. So then he'll give me a really beautiful prose-filled description of the character that I asked for. And I'll take that and I'll extrapolate that into all of the abilities that you see that it can do.
I'm pretty sure when you handed me like the sketch for Thousandfold Roar, it was like, where is my druid? I'm like, what? Like, there's no shape-shifting in this game. What?
There is now.
Okay, fine. Or like, Twice Fallen Star needs to be really fast. I'm like, okay, a really fast one. We can do a really fast one. But yeah, so having basically opening the floodgates, and then at that time we were playing Diablo 3 a lot, and I saw a quick overlap because I mean the Lumen SRD. By all accounts, is supposed to like replicate like Destiny,
right?
Or Warframe, where you've got a couple of buttons you can reliably punch, and you'll make things happen,
and you'll pick up loot.
Exactly, you'll pick up loot. We were playing Diablo, and there are a couple extra buttons to push there, and the cool thing about them is how they work in concert with each other, right? So you'll start. You'll start like a combo where, this will, empower your minions to go and do this thing. And, the play together feels better when your stuff complements your buddy's stuff, right? And what we wanted at that point, because Diablo 3 had the thing where you would alter how your abilities worked, the runes that you would select that would, instead of doing this kind of damage, it does this kind of damage now, or now it does a stun instead and half as much damage or something like that. So I'm like, it'd be really cool if there was like a choice that you could make after you made the choice for this ability. What if there were like not a tech tree, but like optional upgrades to your abilities, and that was a brain unlocking moment, because at that point we went from everybody having 6 abilities to everybody having 18 abilities. And that's a lot of words, Greg. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, but it's not. What's neat about it for me reading it is it's not going back to your D20 journey, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like 16 levels or anything. It's all branching, which I think is really, really cool. Let's talk about a class that didn't make it, because I can't imagine every time one of you had an idea that it ended up surviving. So what's one that died and why?
There's one that died. So I was tinkering with a venom based character.
Ooh,
so something that tinkered with poisons and venoms and secretions and things of that nature. And it felt like there were other ones that I didn't want to take away the cool abilities from other ones where it was part of their kit that kind of already leaned into that. And like having one that only did that felt dishonest when others had aspects of it available to them. And so I wrote a couple abilities, and then we were like, no, it's not a good fit. So we did actually edit one out. So there would have been a poison word without a shot.
It was bookkeeping the ride, the experience as a class, right? Because a lot of it was damage over time. So every round you would have to keep track of well, this thing has 3 venom counters on it, so it takes 3 damage. But health pools aren't very large in Hedge, which means that the ramp up for a damage over time class was bad feels. So we were like, that's not gonna work. So out came the venom warden. I cannot remember its name.
I don't remember either.
It was the breath of ruin or something like that. I can't remember. They all have crazy mythic names.
One of the things that struck me when I first read Hedge was the loot was unexpected. Right. So, when I think of looter shooters and I look at other Lumen games, and this is not a knock on how they handle it. It's not obvious. I don't know what the word is. It's expected, and not in a bad way, right? Expected is a good thing in many cases. Yours wasn't. So I want to get a sense. Well, first, let's describe to everybody what's unique about Hedge loot. And then I'm dying to know where the ideas came from.
So Hedge loot, obviously you have your health and your fate. This is how you replenish your ability to use abilities and get your health back. It's very looter shooter in that regard. You pick it back up, but we also you have the potential at least to drop grafts. So when you vanquish a fairy foe, a part of themselves becomes available to you. That might be their horns, their claws, maybe even just a tattered piece of their robe. And these grafts do more or less correlate to the abilities written within the book, but we don't hard say you have to use that. It's if you can't think of anything, use those as your give them the ability that the monster has. Because I know people actually love that. You see a monster do something really cool in D&D, and you're like, wait a minute, how do I do that? And you can't.
Yeah.
Well, in this game, you can. You can take that ability. Or you could be like, oh, you know what else? Seems like it would fit really well that I would rather do with this graft. I wanted to do this instead. So the grafts are the unique thing that they drop, which makes your character kind of infinitely customizable. As you see something very cool that you wish you could do, you have the potential to grab it for yourself, put it on your character. Now your character can do that very cool thing.
But there's a horrific aspect to it, though, that we're glossing over, which I love.
So everything about our game Hedge is has one foot in body horror, but that kind of mythic, almost Cooley Cattle Raid, Warp Spasm, Irish mythology, body horror, where it is heroic body horror. When you pick up a graft, let's say, I think the Flaret, one of the Court of Ash and Cinder, one of the things that it can drop is a cluster of waving white hot tentacles, right? So you pick up this cluster of waving white hot tentacles and you graft like a skin graft or a plant graft where you graft different kinds of plants together to create a hybrid. You take in this fairy magic and it changes your Hedge-given armor and power. So now you can describe how grafting on this cluster of white hot tentacles has changed you. And grafts, unlike a magical item, are not meant to be explicitly enumerated this does this thing. A graft is like your power is kind of I push the button and something cool happens. I push the button and a problem is solved, right? Grafts are single use per incursion, which means that you have carte blanche to do something above the pale or beyond the pale. That cluster of waving white hot tentacles can melt away armor. It can punch through a puzzle block. It can arrest your fall by clawing into the mountainside. You have a problem. You turn to your graft and you ask the GM, hey, could I conceivably use a graft too? And your GM is encouraged to say, yeah, no, that follows the fiction.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, you could absolutely one-to-one correlate your graft to that cluster of Flaret tentacles is encircle and sear, right? You could entangle a foe and deal some damage, and that would be cool. But also, maybe we save the Hail Marys for those clutch moments where...
it's also a good time to bring up, you want to have good safety tools when you play this game. I saw a actual play where someone picked up the graph that was the tongue of the creature, and the ensuing scene was actually they decided to have a very graphic moment of removing their own tongue to replace it with this tongue. And I thought, that's so cool, but also very gory.
Yeah. And it, I've preached about the safety tools. Safety tools are not restrictive. They're free. They give you freedom, right? Because
you can play harder.
Yeah, you can play harder. It's the best way to put it. I completely agree. I'm trying to figure out how to word this because I'm excited to hear the answer, but I'm not sure how to ask the question. Why isn't it just the hedge that you guys sent me? Why does it? How did it become more? Right? How did we get here? Why is it not? Because it's great. The one that's not, I've got like 4 copies of it because you guys were so generous when you sent it over. I don't think it needs to be crowdfunded. How about that? I don't think it needs to be bigger, but somehow it does. And I want to know how it got there because you guys have a lot of games, but this one made it to the top of the list.
I like more. I like more. So the original game was a combat game, and it was a great combat game. But as soon as we finished it, I'm like, okay, well, because you only have the month to do a game jam. So, sorry, got a frog.
It's the morning.
It's early. I haven't even cleared out my throat yet. So we put out the game jam. It took a month. There's only so much you can pack into a month. And I agree that the amount of game that was done in that month is impressive by my standards even now. And for the time when we were exceptionally new.
We were just babies.
But once it was done and it was out, I'm like, okay, so we have this great combat game out, but like I want to do the world building. I want to do base building. I want to see what happens when you come back. I want the downtime. I want to have adventures on our side of the hedge where we're not specifically going into Fairy, but maybe they're doing incursions into our land. And then we need to protect our land. What does that mean? And so we came up with the very simple but really nicely elegant mechanics for like managing your people's hope and like their needs. And it ended up becoming more because I love all of that extra nonsense. I like the campaigniness of having a character that's fully fleshed out beyond just being this really cool war machine.
It was important that because I felt constrained. Well, we felt constrained by the 30 days. It was a jam. So a lot of like I have a half-formed idea, and I say, hey, Navi, like, do you think we could like fit in? Do you think we fit in like a map drawing element here? Do you think we could like create a homeland map and everything? And she's like, not in 30 days. It's like, what if we had like factions? We could put like factions in, and like factions could like afford extra opportunities, or maybe they help you swap out your gear, or they refine like your grafts, or you can. She's like, not in 30 days. Yeah. I'm like, okay, but what about like long-standing campaign play? And she's like, yeah, that would be really cool. But not in 30 days.
Right.
Smallest iterable.
Yeah.
When you're making TTRPGs, the drive to get something that you can get to the table and play, a stepping stone on the way to the thing that you envision is important. And setting small, measurable goals. I mean, we've all heard the spiel, but like a small, actionable goal is better than pie in the sky any day. No matter how brilliant your pie in the sky may be, you cannot play an idea. So getting the 60-page Ashcan together was the first step. But after that, we had a development document that was like another 4 pages of just like stuff. It's like, it'd be really cool if, and she's like, write it down, but not right now. Like we cannot develop it right now. And this is why a good project manager is vital.
I basically create a Kanban board for every single game that we make. And I'm like, this is the to-dos, this is the nice to-dos, and this is like the pie in the sky, like long-term goals if we get there.
You're really good at pie in the sky though.
Yeah, that gets filled up fast.
Well, so like I go in, I think we're getting close to my answer, which I'm excited about. If I go to your itch page, I'm going to find a lot of games. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine each of those games has that board you just mentioned, right?
Yes.
Navi, it's not unique to Hedge. What I'm trying to figure out is how does Hedge rise to the top, right? Because you guys have a ton of fertile options here. When you say, hey, let's go ahead and crowdfund, let's make a game bigger. And you've got a sea of choices here. Why does Hedge make it?
There's kind of two two things behind it for me. Shawn might have a different opinion, but one is community interest. Just in general, are people already talking about it? Hedge was one of those games where when it came out, people played it, they talked about it, they liked it. There was a lot of feedback on it because it had built up a small, organic audience. And that is important. That's an important indicator that something is going to do fairly well because people already believe in it. So that's probably my number one. Actually, that's probably just it. We can just go with that one.
Well, if I'd never even thought about that, but that's got to be a huge thing because that's the game coming back to you at that moment, right? When you realize that this is hitting different, maybe.
Yeah. The moment somebody reaches out to you and says, "Hey, I love this. Is there any more?" Right? That's huge. That's because we release a lot of ash cans. We release a lot of games that are that early playable draft that is fun and full of interesting stuff. And there are people who are like, "Hey, thanks for making this. This is really cool." But then there are some people who are like, "Hey, this made me really excited to be a GM." Hey, this is something that I play with my therapy group,
right?
Or hey, this hits a tone that I didn't realize that I needed. Is there anything else like it that I could be consuming? Any of those things. If you are lucky enough to have people reach out to you and say, "Hey, I enjoyed the thing," the natural instinct is well, now I'm going to do it even harder, right?
Yeah.
But Craig, I want to say like Navi that it was a business decision on my point, that hey, there's a market for it and we could probably kickstart this successfully. But for me, it's probably the thing in our docket that I love the most. It's the thing that it was the thing that felt the best when I was writing it. The kind of mythic post-fall, the everybody doing everything they can just to make sure that everybody else is safe and taken care of and rebuilding, and the shepherding of hope is something that resonates for me, and I want desperately for it to resonate with other people.
Yeah. So we're a couple crowdfunds in for the two of you. What are you learning? So what are we doing with Hedge from a strictly business, mechanical, operational that is an example of you're learning every time you crowdfund?
That's a good question.
You got anything? I got some nonsense.
No. Let's spare Craig the nonsense.
I want both.
His listeners don't need the nonsense. So we are taking our first halting steps because sometimes the learning process is we're going to try something, right? And in this case, we want to do the cards, the faux cards, so that there's an at a glance reference for here I'll grab my monsters and I'll put them down, because say what you want about Dungeons and Dragons, the idea of having stuff that goes with the game is neat. There's a collectability aspect. There's a feely at the table aspect that is cool. So,
but it's also valuable GM aid. It's really nice to not have to flip pages and just have them all laid out in front of you and know exactly what's on the board. Oh my gosh! So that was mostly for me. I'm that person wants everything really organized and easily accessible.
I'm absolutely going to score some for myself. Put them on a key ring and just flip through.
Just pop off the
so that's a thing that we're trying. As far as lessons learned that we've been carrying forward, we are keeping the stretch goals small and contained. Mm-hmm. The stretch goals in not earlier projects, but in some projects that we have borne witness to can get astronomical as far as the amount of work for the amount of pledge dollars that they actually bring in.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So all of our stretch goals this time are not things that will extend the timeline. are not things that will require.
Well, we've always tried to. We've always
Sure.
been thinking about that. Like, I don't want anything that's going to push our timeline out. When our timeline gets pushed out, it's always something fiddly that's unavoidable, like art backup or things like that.
Being sick for months at a time.
I'm just getting over strep throat. It's probably why I'm having some knee problems right now. Like, I'm the queen of sick.
But in this case, it was all. It was very much like, here's what we have. Here is, a couple more iterations of things, just more stuff, which I have a head full of ghosts, and I'm happy to channel it into paper. So that's not an extension. Every time we hit a stretch goal, like, I'm already writing the stretch goal by the time the stretch goal unlocks. Then it's just like, I think our stretch goals after that, like, there's one system and it's our capstone, and that's the Fallen Wardens, which can provide like a campaign level antagonist. So having like a big bad evil guy system to bolt on top, that is a force multiplier for the legions of scary fairies that you'll be facing. A nemesis system like you would see in like Shadow of War or Shadow of Mordor.
But to that effect, also knowing exactly what you mean by that stretch goal, that was a mistake. The one mistake that we made with Court of Blades, which is why the capstone of Court of Blades has still not come out. Because when we said we were going to put in a system where you could actually play the nobility, because people had there was a big interest in that, we didn't actually know in advance what that meant for the game or how we wanted to execute it. And so over the years, it's become this back and forth of like, what about this? How about this? And it's ended up not getting done because we don't have that perfect execution for how we would actually want to enter. So we're much more careful now that when we put out a stretch goal, that we can deliver on it. That's the only stretch goal that we've never or have not yet delivered on, I should say. Not yet.
Yeah. I've written 3 or 4 Court of Thrones at this point, but like, we're right. And I appreciate the people who buy our games and play our games too much to put out something that is jank.
I would rather have nothing. Right. Than for you to be wasting not only your time, but my time.
Exactly. Like but when Court of Thrones comes out, it will be something that slots in seamlessly and provides further fiction, not an additional board game that you play on the side.
Right.
I despair of that. That keeps me up nights, actually. Like there are days I wake up and I'm like, I still owe those people Court of Thrones.
Yeah.
Okay,
makes you feel better. I forgot about it.
Have to start another game.
We reminded you. You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. I can be angry at me.
That was actually a big lesson that we did take for. In advance when you like throw out a cool idea for a stretch goal, what the hell that actually means.
Also, don't put up stretch goals that you'll be disappointed if you don't hit.
They're very important.
Like
stuff that you actually want to put out, put it low and put it tight. Like get them out there.
The idea that you would put something in your stretch goals list at the very end that you desperately want to get into people's hands. It's happened to me, and I hate it so much. But them's the break sometimes. But
that's a good one.
That's absolutely something that I'll carry forward with me until. Yeah,
and Kickstarters are completely unpredictable. You have no idea how a Kickstarter is going to go. We've had projects that like I felt are arguably like our best and do very poorly, and like some of our weakest do exceptionally well. And I'm like, I don't know what to make of it. I wouldn't even begin to know how to gauge it ahead of time to the point where it sounds like you can't.
You need an economist. Is what you need. Like, You need somebody who is schooled in the esoteric arts of both like marketing and economy, and I guess probably like haruspicy, I think, or like some kind of reading of the entrails is required to really know whether or not. All you can do is put your best foot forward, make sure that everything is put together as best you can, worded as concisely as you can, deliver your bottom line up front, and hope that somebody is honestly,
don't ever get discouraged discouraged about like a Kickstarter not performing as well as you hope, because you have to remember that books are evergreen. These things have long tails, so your games always have the ability over time to potentially gain a bigger audience and snowball over time. We've had games that we released to crickets, and then randomly after a year and a half, someone happened to pick it up and start talking about it, and then all of a sudden everybody's playing it. These things happen.
You don't have a long tail anymore.
Well, something that makes the two of you unique is this is how you make a living. And that is unique in this industry, right?
It is.
There's very few people, creators, that are doing what the two of you are pulling off. It's one thing for us to say, well, you know what, it didn't perform as well as we wanted it to, but I'm going to get up tomorrow morning and I'm going to hop on Zoom and make a living, right? That's not the case for the two of you. So how scary is that?
I am very, very, okay. I'm a penny pincher, first of all. So like, I'm very good with money. I'm always keeping an eye on where every dollar is going. And I am a natural pessimist. So I base everything off of the worst case scenario. So I'm like, if our Kickstarter only does what I would consider to be like the worst possible for our performance, which would be about 20 grand is usually what I consider the worst. I base everything off of that. If we only make 20 grand off this project, what does that mean for our expenses over the course of the year? Fortunately, there are a lot of outlets as game designers because all of our eggs are never in one basket. We're obviously not living off of Kickstarter videos. Right. So, we've got games with distributors. They're in stores. They're available on Amazon. We sell, obviously, our PDFs, our ash cans. We have a Patreon full of amazing supporters. So, all together, it works out pretty well to where a bad Kickstarter doesn't scare us, but you do wish it'd be really nice to get that little extra bump on a Kickstarter, just even my roof needs to be replaced, but,
right? Has been since we moved in.
We have the leakiest roof. Well, because we bought that really old house up in the mountains, which was great financially because the economy here is actually very good, which is part of how this works out so well is we live somewhere that has a lot of amenities and is amazing and beautiful, but has a low cost of living compared to most of the United States. So it's amazing. Yeah. But this big old house that we bought, we've been just nonstop working on it since we moved in, and it doesn't look like it's improving because of how much work it needs done.
The D20 reference. It's only level 2.
Exactly.
And it'll get really great around level 20.
And that's when we'll sell it.
That's
exactly.
When we move.
That's hilarious.
So we keep our dreams aggressively small. That's what it really comes down to.
Manageable, not small, manageable.
Small. Easy to wrangle.
Yeah.
Like cats in a basket. So I don't recommend anybody jump in with both feet
into game design?
Into game design and selling and the market in general, unless you're able to accept not only wild instability, not able to handle stress well.
Right.
If you fight about money.
Oh, don't ruin your relationships over dollars.
And if you want for anything beyond the ability to just make a living by publishing weird stuff and putting it out into the world, if that isn't your absolute dream, if that is a stepping stone to your Lambo.
Yeah, no, that's a good and healthy goal because you do see the really big Kickstarters that do $300-400 grand, and people think that that's really good money. But first of all, a lot of that goes to huge teams. The bigger ones that do that much money, they tend to have very large teams. They have huge art budgets. There's a lot going on, so it's not as much at the end of the day. And then when you take the amount that is left at the end of the day and spread it out, it's still not a ton of money. So this is not a get rich type of thing. But if you are willing to wear enough hats, if you're willing to learn enough, and if you put out things that resonate with people, which is also very important, you will over time build up a big enough audience. But it's not it is at its heart a hobby, and if you happen to be lucky enough and find a big enough audience that hobby can pay for your living expenses so that you can focus on that hobby, that's an amazing feeling. That's an amazing thing. But I really do feel that this is not necessarily a career path. It's not like, oh, people should grow up to do this, because it is not something that most people can reasonably do. The amount of work that has to get done and the money that comes in for that work it's very, very skewed. You really got to be passionate. You got to have the skills and you want to do it. You have to.
I would imagine there's a tremendous amount of discipline involved.
Oh, I'm so not disciplined. Craig, I'm so not disciplined.
Keep them
And let me put it this way. Like, I am behind on getting episodes out of this podcast, right? And that happens to me where I go through periods where the last thing I want to do is edit. The last thing I want to do is piece it together. And so I don't, right? And I know, that disappoints some listeners. I know the vast majority of my listeners haven't even noticed, right?
You got such a big back catalog. They're still like on episode 90 working their way.
Yeah, right. So
that's where we were.
but that's
the first time.
That is that's inconsequential, right? Whereas in your position with a similar thing, you have to have that discipline where I don't feel like marketing games today. Well, too freaking bad, right?
That's actually my job. Like I say that it's making role playing games, but really my job is like Blue Sky and Threads and Tumblr and Instagram, and I am a social media marketing machine. I'm a professional shit poster. Like that's most of what I do here. And then occasionally, like I'll write some cool stuff about fairies, and people will be like, "Hey, that's really neat. I wonder if you wrote a book." But
so because I'm so analytical, I break down all the processes and I identify. This is how I am with everything, but I identify what parts are going to be my sticking points. Like, what do I know I fucking hate doing and I have to get done? So I identify them so that I know they're coming. And you might think that's horrible because now you're even more anxious about putting them off or whatever. But it helps me. It helps me time how far I can put them off. And I will put them off until the last fucking second. Yep. And then I will fucking plug my nose, hold my nose, and get it done. And move on with my life. So I always know which parts I'm not going to enjoy, and I know how to get through them as quickly as humanly possible. Just rip the Band-Aid off.
You got to eat your vegetables and leave yourself a bite of cake after the vegetables. That's the.
Well, it also rings of like naming the horror, right? By laying it out and putting it out in front of you and having timelines, you've taken some of the power away from it by naming it, right?
That's nice. I like that.
Yeah, that's really cool. So guys, we're going to take one more break, and then I don't remember if it was Navi or it was Shawn, but they said something very evocative on social media that I'm not going to let them get away with. So when we come back, we're going to talk about a simple idea, which is, can you win an RPG? Be right back.
Hello, my name is Sam Dunewald, and I'm here to tell you about Dice Exploder, my tabletop RPG design podcast where each week I take a single game mechanic and break it down with a friend. Come listen to me talk to Alex Roberts about love and pity, John Harper about elegance and layout, and Mikey Ham about, what else? Exploding dice! It's Dice Exploder, breaking down RPG design one mechanic at a time. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
So when we kind of scrambled a little bit, to book this and make this happen, I was thinking, well, what is something I love talking to the two of you together and individually about ideas. For whatever reason, I really find how each of you work through concepts to be super interesting. So you threw me a list of things because I said it like, guys, I want something cool to talk about for 1 second. And you guys sent me a phenomenal list and it wasn't easy. This is the one that jumped out at me. So let's start off with, I assume the answer is yes, you can win an RPG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A RPG, a narrative of any kind should have like a rise and fall and a resolution. And I feel like an RPG, like any other narrative, needs a resolution of some kind to feel story shaped and complete. I'm well aware of the 20-year D&D campaign that just goes on and on and on and on and on. New characters rotate in and out, domain play, and all that stuff, and it's simulating a living fantasy world. And I guess that's cool, but like, what are you trying to do? Like, characters want things, and if they get them, that's winning. Mm-hmm. And if they don't get them, that's losing. So like, both of those are resolutions, and both of them, one of them can kind of suck. Like, you can, like that didn't feel good at all. But by the same token, like, it is an ending.
Satisfying. There's a satisfaction knowing that you've completed a story and you have now the whole shape of it, rather than this case of it petering out or people losing interest or dropping off, and then there's no resolution. So you're like, you have these great ideas, but you don't have a great story in your head.
So everything you said makes sense to me, right? And I'm nodding my head as the two of you are talking. But so why is this controversial?
The idea that like a win scenario, or a loss scenario, I think it provokes a fear response in some folks, because actually let me answer this with an anecdote that is going to kind of ramble for a second, but follow me through. Okay, I had a buddy named Andrew in high school who he was the kind of guy who would always be like, "Hey, I can see you taking it easy on us. I can see you I can see you pulling punches. I can see like you don't fool me, Wizard of Oz. Like this doesn't feel real, right?" And I'm like, "Look, the game we're playing has given me much bigger guns than it has given you. I can arbitrarily decide fate on this side of the screen. So everything I do is artifice. I roll the dice in front of you. You can see the dice in front of you. Like, that is as best I can do, right?" He's like, "But it doesn't feel real." I'm like, "Look, if you die, the game is over, right? And if you die, the game is over, and I don't have a game anymore, and that upsets me, right? If we extrapolate that, if you get the thing that you want, the game is over, and then I don't have a game anymore." And at one point, that was terrifying to me. The idea that like this thing that I really enjoyed, we were gaming 3 times a week at that point, right? This thing that I really enjoyed, like my favorite social occasion, comes to an end, and I don't know whether or not, if I say, "Hey, do you want to play again? Do you want to play something else?" If you will say yes. Right now, my schedule is cleared, and like we do this every week.
I think from the player perspective, that's also valid. I think that if people know what the end looks like, maybe they feel like they're being deprived of some of the discovery. And it takes a mind shift, because instead of being like, "Oh, I'm being deprived of the discovery of what the ending looks like," it's like, that's the ending. Here I am. I'm going to get there as like in the most badass way possible and just make the most amazing story I can and see if I actually succeed at hitting that particular goal. And so it's just a big shining goal at the end is really what it is. And I think that's beautiful. I love knowing, like in Court of Plays, I love knowing that my job is to destroy every other house in the city so that my house is the number one, and that's what I'm going to do. And like how I do that though is up to me.
I think there's something to be said. Like there's a video game metaphor here where people will ask how long a game is. Right? Is it a 100-hour game? Oh, is it a 50-hour game? Well, I don't think that I want to pay $60 for a 50-hour game. Oh, it's a 15-hour experience, super tight and narrow and constrained. I'm definitely not paying $60 for a 15-hour experience. If you know up front that this is a short contained and supposed to be short and contained, maybe you don't engage with that, right? However, sometimes there's a 15-hour story that goes on for 100 hours. I know for a fact that I played a lot of Skyrim in 2011, 2012. That was a game that had the Radiant Quest system where it would create new stuff for you, but it all started feeling the same. It wasn't hitting the same highs and lows. You weren't following the arc and the journey and everything. It was just more for the sake of more. I think Skyrim should cut to black the moment that you save the world or whatever, because it goes out on a note that doesn't feel like oatmeal. You're not just like you ate your steak and you ate your vegetables and you already had dessert, and now they're just bringing you more and more oatmeal. Like the meal is not getting any better for it. This is an episode for abstract metaphors.
Well, what's neat about it is my real first experience with this I had with you, Navi, with Brindlewood Bay. One of the things that I think is really cool about Jason's games is there is an end. These games will end. And in all three of his big games that are out now, you're not going to die, right? Like when we were playing Brindlewood Bay, Navi, like you would have to basically the player has to decide my character's going to die, right? There's nothing else that's going to cause that to happen. So that's not the end. But there is, and as we were playing Brindlewood Bay, we knew where we were going. We knew that there was going to be a final session. That final session was going to be the big confrontation at the end with the evil that's been lurking through all of it. That was exciting for me. And I was very surprised by that. And it's exactly what you're talking about.
I think the idea of beginning with the end in mind allows you, to dust off the old chestnut again, it allows you to play harder because you know where you're going and you get to enjoy the road, knowing that the road is going somewhere that matters.
And I think it builds, because again, it's a psychological thing. It builds a framework within your mind. Now that you have the goal in mind, how to make it harder to reach that goal for the players, I think that starts to fill itself in much faster than if you were trying to create step by step a story that's unfolding.
So that's metagaming, and that's a dirty word.
I love metagaming because we're all playing pretend, exactly. And if you can bring more fullness of story because you have an idea of where you're going, that's not a dirty thing. That's not bad. That's a beautiful experience.
If you can only enjoy the fiction without recognizing that it is fiction that you are creating together, without acknowledging the game, that's a skill issue.
No, it's very true. It's very true. And it, so I've run, two of Jason's games. I ran Public Access and I ran Brindlewood Bay. And the word that you said is exactly captures, I think, why this resonates with me, which is satisfying. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sad at the end. I mean, don't get me wrong. I miss the Murder Mavens. I miss playing where we had such a great table together. But my heart wasn't broken when we were done. It was so satisfying, and now it's always there. And we did everything. Went from the very beginning to the very end, and the only word that pops into my head is satisfying. And so if that's how you win an RPG, I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm. I think that is probably the fullest of the answers to can you win an RPG is if you can imagine your favorite book series, television series, franchise of movies or whatever, just going off into the middle distance and then stopping one day. Or you can imagine.
What they do sometimes, you get so mad. I get mad. I'm like, where in the hell is the rest of Firefly? Fuck you.
Yeah.
Or you come to a resolution. You look around at each other and be like, and I think that's where it ends. Our time in this world with these characters is done. Now there are corners that we could explore in a different game.
Yep.
There are epilogues that we could write. There are any number of love letters to this experience that we've all shared that we can create. But I think that this particular game is over. Is not bad.
No,
I don't think that should be an acrimonious expression, right?
Well, if you're expecting it, if on the flip side you're playing, let's say, a game that you don't know where the ending is coming and you're having a great time and you've never expected an ending and all of a sudden the GM goes, and that's the end because I'm out of shit to say.
Yep.
That's a very sad feeling for everyone because they didn't see it coming.
And that is why we build a mechanical end to our game and put it in the book. and say, this is what you're working toward. This is how Hedge has an end goal, an ending condition. You restore you repopulate the hearth, your last bastion of humanity. You supply them, and you redeem their hope. And when the hope clock fills, the hedge reasserts itself, and the fairies can't come through anymore. That's what you're fighting for. There are ways that you can affect those clocks. Coming back and like failing and fading, and all of these things will affect the clocks. Going out in downtime can, change those clocks. You decide the pace, but you have a determined end. Like, if you can hold out long enough, if you can keep the hope in the hearth on the increase, you can win. And that's a good feeling. Like, you have weathered the apocalypse, and the world will reassert itself, and everything will be okay. And you can hang up the armor, and you can be a person again.
You have your own tongue.
You have your own tongue.
All right. So the other thing I can't let happen is I can't let you guys go without talking about what you've been grooving on. So let me start with you, Navi. What is something, book, another game by somebody else, video game, miniseries? Is there something recently that has kind of taken over your brain?
Goodness. I don't know. I think this is the quintessential problem with somebody with autism, right? My favorite things are always my favorite things. They so rarely change. So I'm like grooving on Shansha like a lot still.
Who's that one show that you were watching with the heroine who gets trapped in like the video game, and she has to like has to figure out like.
Oh no, yeah, that's exceptionally cute. Okay. It's got one of those really long, weird titles that I can't remember right now. But girl gets sucked into a video game, and she's dumped into like the worst possible position, because that's how these shows always go. And it's super adorable because she has to, like, in order to win the game and get back home, she has to like win the love of this character who's completely, honestly, unfucking likable and horrible. And you're like, oh god, like you feel for her because of how bad this fucking character.
Every time she dies, doesn't she like go back to the beginning and like
every time she keeps getting herself killed, and they roll her back. It was actually really cutely executed, but it was also a shanxia, which is a genre of Chinese fantasy, which has like become my obsession for over the last few years. I think I've consumed every well-rated shanxia as wow. China, and these fucking things are like 40-hour-long episodes a piece, right? But they're so it's so good. Okay, the tropes are different. Like they're not Western tropes. You have all new tropes. You have all new expectations, and they follow a. This actually kind of works with the whole endings are satisfying. They follow a very specific formula every time, and they don't diverge even between different groups. This starts out really cute and happy and fun, and then it gets really tragic and sad, like you're bawling your eyes out, very cathartic because everything's. But you always get a happy ending. Like there's always a very satisfying, happy resolution. So you get this full roller coaster, and you know every time when you start a shanxia exactly what you're signing up for the next 40 fucking hours of your life. A very deep, interesting story with a robust roller coaster, but you're gonna get a happy ending. So no matter how sad you get, you know that it's okay. Somehow it's gonna get better.
Yeah. It's a 3-act structure, but it's a different one than you're used to.
Yeah, I love it. I love it so much.
Well, and there's a lot that can happen when it's not a question of what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. It's just a question of how it's going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And that's very cool. And you're right; it does tie very close to the conversation we were just having, and that there's a ton of room for that and a lot of joy to find in that. Or you can also take a break from that and go find I have no idea how this is going to end, and that's exciting too. But there's sometimes predictable gets a bad name in the same way that tropes become a dirty word. And it doesn't have to be. So that's really cool. Now I'm going to have to explore that because I've never heard of it before until you just talked about it. And I was going to ask you, how do you know it's one of those? And you just answered the question. So that's super cool.
Well, then for you and anyone else who ever wants to check out Shanxia, I'm going to direct you to the one that got me obsessed.
It's on Netflix.
It's on Netflix.
Oh,
yeah,
good.
It's easy to find. It has got the goofiest names. You're gonna hear the name. And you're gonna think of Navi. love between fairy and devil. It sounds ridiculous. You've got to watch it. And if you watch it and you watch a few episodes and you're like, there's nothing about this that I like, then you can like be mad at me and never watch. But if you start with that and you hate it, you won't like Shansha, because that's the epitome. That's top tier, top shelf Shansha.
That's the one that got you through that really, really bad bout with COVID.
Yeah, that's how I discovered it. I had COVID. I couldn't get out of bed, and I had burned through most of television. And then this show pops up, and I'm like, that has the most ridiculous title. I'm gonna watch that because of that fucking title. And then before I knew it, I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life.
And now my house is always filled with Mandarin Chinese.
Oh, that's so cool. It's so cool when that happens, right? I love it when you discover something that's big that you didn't know about, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously I'm sure this type of storytelling has a huge following somewhere in this small little niche. And it's so cool when you stumble upon it and the door flies open. That's a neat moment. How about for you, Shawn? What's been taking over your brain?
Oh man. So I am a prodigious reader. I just finished hold on, I have to get the author's name real quick. It's a book called Blind Sight that was a brain unlocking sci-fi novel. I don't want to spoil anything, and if I say anything about it, I will spoil it, which sucks. So I'm gonna give you one that right after I tell you who wrote it. I'm gonna give you one that I can actually spoil. Peter Watts wrote Blind Sight. So reading a bunch, and then the magazine of science fiction and fantasy. Like I've been going back catalog, starting in like '88, doing the quarterly magazine, fantasy and science fiction. But the thing that is like tickling my designer brain right now is a video game called Elin, E-L-I-N, or Elin. I'm not sure which. And it is the strangest combination of Stardew Valley and NetHack.
Interesting.
So you are a, amnesiac hero out on the frontier, participating in like a pioneer program, like very West Marches style, to tame the land. But when you start, you're in a little grass hut with a t-shirt and some jeans, and you have to build your little community, because it's a town builder, and a relationship game, and a huge crafting and farming game attached to a dungeon crawler. You need to go and adventure or grow or craft or something to pay your taxes to the kingdom. It is a phenomenally deep game that I still don't understand all the mechanics yet. I got it 2 days ago, and I think I have 18, 19 hours.
Holy shit.
Yeah. It subsumed my life for the past 2 days.
Yeah.
It is tickling something in my brain that I want very badly to get into words, but as yet, I think it's early in the process for me to say why it was so compelling. But it does have the old school NetHack in that everything you get is random and probably cursed and going to make your life more difficult, but you have to go one more dungeon level down to see if there's something cool down there.
I love when I find what I call the how is it 3 a.m. game, right? Those games that you start playing.
Yes.
And you go, how is it, like, what just happened? Like 7 hours just vanished, and I was here the whole time.
Hold on, it was the weekend just a second ago.
Right, exactly.
Age just did that to me, and it was rage playing, because Age is so arbitrary and RNG, and it's supposed to be a roguelike, but the roguelike elements aren't strong enough to actually improve your fucking standing, so you're just losing over and over. Like, it's this cute little pixel game, and then all of a sudden it punches you in the face. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then I rage played it for like an entire day before I was like, I think I'm just playing this out of anger. I have to stop.
Oh, that's amazing.
Everybody's dead. How, Meteor? What?
I hate you. Play.
Do you want to play again? Yes.
I have to kiss you this time.
Oh, God. Rage play. That's phenomenal. So, guys, there is a lot of really cool things you can do on a Saturday morning that doesn't involve speaking with me. And I really appreciate the two of you making the time.
Oh, this is best use of my Saturday morning. I was going to sleep in otherwise.
Hey, for those of you listening, guess what? This is the end. You made it. I appreciate you doing that. Take care. Thank you, Navi and Shawn. Please take a minute and look at their game Hedge. These two are the good guys, the good humans, and they make really great games. So can you win an RPG? I'm dying to hear your thoughts. Please share your thoughts on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky, or email me at admin@thirdfloorwars.com. Your voice matters, and all the links are in the show notes. Please take a minute to rate, review, and share this podcast. Word of mouth is the key to growing Tabletop Talk. Happy gaming, my friend. Remember what Ernest Hemingway once said. The thing is to become a master and, in your old age, to acquire the courage to do what children did when they knew nothing. Go create like you know nothing. Holy shit, guys, we always end up finding like a really interesting thing every time we talk, and I really love that. Did not anticipate us to do that, and I appreciate you trusting, because you guys were very well within your rights to say, hey, Craig, we don't want to talk about like finances and stuff like that. So thank you for doing that, because I've never had that conversation.
Look, man, truth dies in darkness.
Yeah.
Oh, that was really cool. That was really cool, and that's going to mean a lot to some people listening. So that was awesome.
I hope it wasn't too doomy.
No, it was fantastic.
I always try to ride the line. Like, I don't want to scare people, but also you should know.
You should. No, that was really
Okay.
I'll bring us back. Hey, are you still here? Look, the podcast is over. And you sat through all of the breaks and bloopers? Well, I mean, if you're here, you might as well run over to patreon.com and become a supporter. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast too while you're at it, on whatever platform you're listening to. I do appreciate you sticking around. Take care.